5 possible reasons why pastors may not preach with the kind of blood-bought urgency for the holiness of their people that they should. And I'd be very happy if you're not in any of these 5 categories. And I would be just as happy if you escaped because of hearing these categories. Number 1, perhaps some pastors have simply not seen the connection between the sin-bearing work of Christ and the sin-killing work of the Christian. It was just a blind spot. They missed it. Nobody ever showed you how to read the Bible by looking for in-order that's and becauses and therefores and participles, and you miss glories because you miss grammar. So if that's your case, then perhaps you're fixed right now. or you've been on your Twitter, which a lot of you have been. Number 2, perhaps some are reluctant to press the conscience of their people with biblical demands for holiness because they fear the rebuke of Jesus to the lawyers when he said, "Woe to you lawyers! You load people with burdens hard to bear, and you yourselves do not touch those burdens with one of your fingers." And you don't want to hear that rebuke from Jesus, and neither do I. But to such pastors, I would say, I would plead, that you not try to address a real biblical danger in an unbiblical way. The point of this message is that the Christian fight for holiness is connected to the forgiveness of sins in a gloriously unique gospel way. No other religion in the world comes close to what I'm talking about in the connection between the sin-bearing work of Christ, finished, perfect, effective, and the warfare that you have against sin. Nobody even comes close to teaching what the New Testament teaches here. One way to say it would be, the only sin that you can conquer in life is a forgiven sin. I'd love to preach another 1-hour message on why that is true, but you can, it's in this message, you just have to think it through. The only sin you can successfully strive against without incurring the judgment of God on your legalism is a forgiven sin. This is glorious. This is a glorious way to become holy. So, brothers, get to know this strange, wonderful, unique gospel dynamic for how to move from the sin-bearing work of Christ to the sin-killing work of the Christian, and show your people how to live it. It will take a decade or 2. I mean, after 33 years, I had people who didn't catch on to anything I said. Some people are just so locked into their way of thinking about being a Christian that you can just pour your heart out in your best explanations and your best care, and they're stuck in the same categories they were 30 years ago. Don't worry, lots of people will come along. You just hang in there. Number 3, some pastors avoid preaching on the urgency and necessity of holiness because their own secret lives are morally compromised. They are wasting time on trifles. They are watching movies that fill their minds with worldliness and ungodliness. They are dabbling in pornography or worse. They are dishonest in their financial dealings. They continually overeat in bondage to food. They neglect the teaching of their children in things of the Lord, and they don't pray with their wives. They are starting to medicate with wine at night, which they once called freedom. Their casual mouth has become crude. They've grown weary of fruitful Bible study, and they are becoming second-handers and using other people's sermons. Is it any wonder that these pastors preach grace? To forgive and not grace, to conquer. Any wonder? There's no mystery there. The grace to defeat sinning, rarely touched on, but the grace that we're okay while he lives in sin. They lift high the cross, covering all their sins, and never make the biblical connection with the crucified one conquering pornography. He was crucified to conquer your pornography. He was crucified to conquer your laziness. He was crucified to conquer our gluttony. He was crucified to conquer our dishonesty. He was crucified to bring back the joy of creating your own sermons. Number 4, some pastors avoid anything approaching the kind of preaching that would confront people with their sin and would risk making them unhappy. There are pastors that are so deeply infected with the coddling culture that we live in, coddling culture of contemporary America. They're not only hypersensitive to being offended, but in the pulpit, they're fearful of stirring up anybody's displeasure. And there are reasons for this. There are reasons for this reluctance to preach the urgency of holiness. And one of them is a deep, deep-seated insecurity in the pastor. Never has grown up out of it. Our insecurities can come from lots of different places. So I would encourage you to get to know your insecurities really well, be honest about them, and dig deep into sovereign grace, and if necessary, get a counselor to help you so that you become a free person, free from bondage to people-pleasing. Finally, number 5. Some pastors are so fearful of being labeled conservative or fundamentalist or progressive or woke or whatever the circles you care about would look down upon, that they're going to avoid any kind of biblical command that would put them in some camp that they don't want to be a part of. That's a bondage. That's a bondage. So, for example, this is not going to deal with racial discrimination because they're going to get called woke. They're not going to deal with modesty or nudity in movies because they're going to get called fundamentalist. They're not going to deal with the fact that we are citizens of heaven before we're citizens of America because they're going to get called unpatriotic by the veterans in the congregation. The remedy for this kind of bondage, brothers, this is a serious bondage today. The remedy for this kind of bondage to the opinions of others is first to become more like Jesus, of whom his enemies said, "Teacher, we know that you're true, and you don't care about anybody's opinion." I love it. "For you're not swayed by appearances, but truly teach the way of God." Don't you want to be free? Like that? "Pastor, we see you don't really care." And the second part of the remedy is to be so radically committed to all the Bible, all of it, all that the Bible teaches, so that just when people think they have you pegged and in some camp, you bring something out of your Bible treasure that just throws them totally off balance. Don't you love to do that? I do. They love you for it if you hang in there. I mean, preach the whole thing. You got to displease everybody sometime, or you're probably not getting it right. All the Bible, so that you, pastor, will become, after maybe 5 years, 10 years, you will become known. Our pastor is nobody's lackey. Nobody. He doesn't live to please men, right or left, rich or poor, white or black, male or female. You march to a biblical drum and let the chips fall where they will. They'll love you for that. I mean, Bible people will love you for that. Partisan people who are more Republican or more Democrat than Christian, they won't love you for that. And you don't want them to love you. You want them to be converted. So my prayer for you is that when all of these obstacles are out of the way, and I'm sure there are others that I haven't thought of, when all these obstacles are out of the way, you would preach and teach and live in such a way as to help your people experience the effective connection between the sin-bearing work of Christ and the sin-killing work of the Christian. Or to link it back into Kevin's message, between the glorious justifying work of the blood and the glorious sanctifying work of the blood. And maybe then you would sing with fresh understanding, "Would you be free from the burden of sin? There's power in the blood. There's power in the blood. And would you o'er evil a victory win? There's power, wonderful power in the blood."